The sun blazed down on Fort Holloway's tarmac, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage of heat and tension. In the center of this pressure cooker stood the Patriot Bell, a UH-1 Huey helicopter, its olive-drab frame a silent relic of Vietnam's jungles. Its rotors hung limp, like the wings of a fallen eagle, defying a team of modern technicians armed with glowing laptops and cutting-edge diagnostics. Every screen screamed green, systems perfect. Yet the engine refused to stir, mocking their expertise with stubborn silence. Into this standoff stepped an old black man, his ebony skin etched with the lines of a life forged in fire, his brown eyes glinting with secrets no algorithm could touch. Elias Vance, summoned by a general's call, stood alone, dismissed by a crew too young to know his legend. Was he a forgotten has-been, or the only soul who could breathe life into this machine? One moment, one wrench, would soon shatter arrogance and rewrite history. Welcome to HeroHush Stories, where courage and justice roar to life. Before we unravel this tale of hidden valor and redemption, hit that like button if you're ready for a story that'll grip your heart, subscribe for more epic heroism, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from today? Let's dive into the saga of the man they called the Ghost, who makes machines, and men, rise from the ashes. Fort Holloway, a sprawling military base nestled in the humid heart of Georgia, buzzed with the pulse of modern warfare. Drones whirred above, their sleek forms slicing through the sky, while F-35s cast sharp shadows across the pristine tarmac. But today, the base's attention was locked on a single anomaly, the Patriot Bell, a UH-1 Huey helicopter from the Vietnam era, its faded green hull a stark contrast to the polished jets around it. Scheduled for a high-profile demonstration flight to honor the base's heritage, the chopper was meant to soar before a crowd of VIPs, senators, retired brass, and press, waiting in an air-conditioned pavilion across the field. Their patience was thinning, and the delay was turning into a public relations disaster. Kyle Kramer, 26, lead technician and a prodigy fresh from MIT, stood at the heart of the chaos. His sharp jaw clenched, his hazel eyes flashing with frustration, he kicked the Huey's landing skid. The dull thud echoed his disgust. "This heap's mocking us," he growled, his voice cutting through the humid air with the biting arrogance of youth and tech. Around him, a dozen technicians in starched coveralls huddled over portable tables, their laptops displaying a symphony of green checkmarks, fuel lines clear, ignition system powered, sensors online. Yet the Patriot Bell remained silent, its rotors drooping in the oppressive heat like wilted fronds, a monument to a war fought before these techs were born. Kramer's team was the elite, avionics specialists with advanced degrees, master mechanics certified on the latest fly-by-wire systems, and a direct line to Bell Helicopter's engineering department. They were the future, wired to algorithms, cloud-based diagnostics, and precision tools that cost more than most people's homes. The pit was a machine with a soul that seemed to defy their every command. Then, from the edge of the tarmac, a figure emerged from the haze. Elias Vance, a black man in his late 70s, stepped forward with a quiet dignity that seemed to anchor the chaotic scene. His skin, a deep ebony weathered by decades of jungle rains, desert winds, and hard-won battles, carried the map of a life lived fiercely. His close-cropped white hair framed a face carved with purpose, his brown eyes, sharp, unyielding, like polished mahogany, locked onto the Huey with a familiarity that bordered on reverence. He wore faded denim jeans, scuffed at the knees, and an olive-green jacket, its patches and frayed cuffs a testament to years of service. His hands, calloused and steady, stayed tucked in his pockets, but his presence was a silent rebuke to the frenetic energy of the younger crew. Summoned by General Michelson himself, Eli was no stranger to this machine. But to the techs, he was an outsider, a black elder out of place in their world of silicon and screens. Lieutenant Wells, the officer overseeing this slow-motion fiasco, strode toward him. Fresh from officer school at 29, his uniform was crisp, his posture rigid with the authority of a man who'd memorized the rulebook. His blonde hair was cropped regulation tight, his blue eyes narrowing as he assessed the intruder. "Sir, this is a restricted area," he said, the word, sir, sharp, stripped of warmth, a formality tossed like a challenge. Eli's voice, low and gravelly, cut through the heat like a blade. General Michelson sent for me. Name's Elias Vance. Kramer, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, overheard and sauntered over, his smirk as sharp as his crew cut. Vance? The retirement pool? We've got PhDs, master techs, and a hotline to Bell's engineers. What's your plan? Whisper sweet nothings to it. The crew's laughter was a jagged edge, cutting through the air. To them, Eli was a relic, a black veteran summoned for some nostalgic whim, his dark skin and weathered frame a stark contrast to their polished tech world. But Eli's eyes stayed on the Huey, as if it were whispering secrets only he could hear. What did he know that their screens couldn't see? And why was a 3-star general's name tied to this quiet old man? The laughter stung like a whip, but Eli didn't flinch. He began a slow, deliberate walk around the Patriot Bell, his steps measured, almost ceremonial, like a man greeting an old comrade after decades apart. He didn't touch the chopper, not yet. His brown eyes traced invisible lines along the rotor mast, the tail boom, the scuffed paint of the fuselage, as if reading a map of memories. The technicians watched with a mix of curiosity and disdain, their arms crossed, their laptops still blinking perfection. 6 hours, Kramer scoffed, tossing his rag onto a toolbox with a flick of his wrist. Multimeters say continuity's perfect. Fuel lines clear. Ignition's got power. Sensors green. This bucket's just given up. The contempt was thick, a wall of arrogance. To them, Eli was a publicity stunt, a black elder from an era of mud and blood, consulting on a machine as ancient as he seemed. Wells checked his tablet, muttering to Kramer. Crew chief in Vietnam. Vietnam. The word dripped with dismissal, as if it were a dusty exhibit in a war museum. Kramer snorted, his voice low but biting. What's he gonna do, patch bullet holes with spit and baling wire? We're on a modern base, LT, with tools worth more than his house. Eli paused near the portside engine cowling, his gaze locking on a small access panel, barely noticeable below the main exhaust. It was scuffed, unremarkable, but something about it drew him in. He squinted, head cocked, his dark hands twitching slightly as if itching to move. That panel flush? He asked, voice soft but weighted with intent. Kramer rolled his eyes, ran a hand over it with exaggerated care. Flush. Bolts torqued to spec. I checked myself. Sensors behind it? All green. Eli's next question was quieter, sharper. Did you open it? Kramer's frustration flared like a spark in dry grass. No reason to. Diagnostics show no fault in that subsystem. Opening it's a paperwork nightmare, factory seals intact. He gestured to the array of laptops, their screens a unified chorus of green. The system knows where the problem is, old man. It's not there. Eli's response was barely audible, yet it cut like a knife. Your system doesn't know this bird. I do. He reached into his faded jacket, pulling out a worn leather pouch, its surface scarred and softened by decades of use. The snap, polished smooth by years of his thumb's touch, clicked open with a sound that seemed to carry history itself. Inside, something glinted, a tool, but not one from any standard kit, its dark metal forged for a purpose only Eli understood. Kramer smirked, leaning in. What's that, Grandpa? Magic wand? Gonna cast a spell? Eli didn't answer. His eyes drifted to the pouch, and the tarmac dissolved. He was 20 again, in a sweltering jungle, the air thick with rot, cordite, and the acrid tang of fear. Rotor blades thumped like war drums, tracer rounds streaking green and deadly through the triple canopy below. His hands, young and bloodied, clung to the skid of this very Huey, the Patriot Bell, as it bled power from a bullet-torn engine. From this pouch, then new and supple, a gift from a pilot he'd pulled sealing tape and a custom wrench, working feverishly to patch the bird mid-flight. The pilot had called him a miracle worker, swearing Eli could raise aircraft from the dead. Braced against the fuselage, wind tearing at him, his dark hands moved with surgical precision, saving the crew as the world burned below. The memory faded, leaving only the ghost of rotor wash in his ears and the weight of survival in his chest. Back on the tarmac, the heat was a living thing, pressing down like a fist. The demo flight was an hour late, the VIPs restless, their murmurs filtering through the base's grapevine. Wells' radio crackled, the base commander's voice tight with barely restrained fury. "Status, Lieutenant." Wells swallowed, his throat dry as sand. "No change, Colonel. Troubleshooting a no start. Running level 3 diagnostics." A pause, heavy as lead. "The civilian? Michaeloson's man?" Wells glanced at Eli, still standing quietly by the engine, his dark silhouette a stark contrast to the gleaming tech around him. "Observing, sir." "Put him on with the general. Now." The order landed like a punch, humiliation burning in Wells' gut. He handed a tactical phone to Airman Peterson, a young crew member with quiet eyes and a knack for noticing what others missed. Peterson had watched Eli's deliberate movements, the way his weathered hands hovered over the Huey with an unshakable intimacy, as if he and the machine shared a language no one else spoke. He saw the tech's sneers, Kramer's arrogance, and something stirred, a memory of his own grandfather, a black mechanic who fixed tanks in the Ardennes and never spoke of the scars he carried. This wasn't right. Peterson handed Eli the phone but stepped aside, heart pounding, and pulled his personal cell. He scrolled to a number he shouldn't have. Major Davies, the general's aide, met at a briefing weeks ago. It was a breach of protocol, a career risk, but his gut screamed louder than fear. "Major, it's Airman Peterson at Holloway," he whispered, turning his back to the crew. "About Mr. Vance." Davies' voice sharpened like a blade. "He okay?" Peterson's words rushed out, low and urgent. "He's fine, but they're treating him like a fool. Laughing, blocking him from the bird. They trust their computers, sir, but Vance, he knows something they don't." Silence on the line, then chaos, muffled shouts, a chair scraping violently. "General, you need to hear this now." Miles away, in an air-conditioned command center, General Michaeloson, a 3-star Titan with a face carved from granite and eyes that could freeze blood, took the phone. Peterson's report, disrespect, dismissal of a black hero, lit a fuse in the general's core. His voice, a low growl, froze the room. "Get Colonel Hayes. Conference the tower. And a car, now." He turned to his staff, voice dangerously quiet, each word a hammer strike. "You don't know Elias Vance. Asha Valley, 68, he kept 60% of the 1st Cavalry's Hueys airborne with scavenged wire and sheer will. They called him the Ghost, dead birds flew under his hands. That Huey. His. 1,000 combat hours. Distinguished Service Cross for landing in a hot LZ, saving a recon team after both pilots went down." He paused, eyes burning with a fire that hadn't dimmed in decades. His mod, built in a mud-soaked tent, made that bird a legend. "Saved my platoon from a hilltop overrun. I was a scared second lieutenant, he was a black man who held chaos at bay." What happens when a general's wrath meets a hero's grace? And will the Huey's secret stay buried under arrogance? Back on the tarmac, tension was a live wire, sparking with every glance. Eli handed the phone back to Peterson, his nod a quiet thank you, his brown eyes steady despite the jeers. He faced the Huey, but Kramer blocked his path, emboldened by the lack of immediate consequences. "Had your chat with your war buddy? We're done. Colonel wants this heap in a hangar." Eli's voice remained calm, unyielding. "I can start her. Just open that panel." Wells had reached his breaking point. His authority, fresh and fragile, was crumbling before his team, challenged by an old black man and a machine that refused to bow. His career flashed before him, a stalled trajectory, derailed by a stubborn relic and an even stubborner veteran. He made a choice, a disastrous one. "Enough," he barked, voice loud enough to turn heads. Mr. Vance, you're a civilian obstructing a military operation on a secure base. Leave, or I'll have you in the stockade for a full security review. He stepped into Eli's space, voice dropping to a threatening hiss. One more word, old man, and you're done. His hand clamped Eli's shoulder, a firm shove to march him off the tarmac, an act of hubris that would haunt him. The air split, not with an engine's roar, but the high-pitched squeal of tires. 3 black command vehicles screeched onto the tarmac, doors flying open before they fully stopped. General Michelson emerged from the lead car, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury, his 3 stars glinting like warning lights. Colonel Hayes followed, his face pale as death, dread etched in every line. The technicians froze, mouths agape, their confidence evaporating. Wells yanked his hand back from Eli's shoulder as if burned, nausea rising in his throat. Kramer's smirk vanished, replaced by a dawning fear. The general didn't run, he moved with a predator's purpose, his eyes locked on Eli, ignoring the rest as if they were mere shadows. The crowd parted like water before a storm. What salute could stop time itself? And what reckoning was about to unfold? Michelson stopped before Eli, his polished boots snapping together with a crack that echoed across the tarmac. He raised his hand in a salute so crisp, so reverent, it seemed to pause the world itself, a 3-star general honoring a black veteran in a worn jacket. Mr. Vance, he boomed, voice carrying like a cannon shot, it is an honor to have you on my base, sir. I apologize for the disgrace you've endured. Eli's brown eyes met his, a flicker of weary understanding in their depths. His dark skin gleamed under the relentless sun, unbowed by decades of struggle or the morning's disrespect. He nodded, not triumphant, but resigned, as if he'd faced this arrogance in 100 different forms over the years. The general turned, his gaze slicing through the crowd, landing on Wells and Kramer with the precision of a laser. This is Elias, the ghost, Vance, he said, voice dropping to a lethal whisper that carried to every corner of the flight line. A living legend of Army aviation. Distinguished Service Cross for Valor. 2 silver stars. Bronze star with V device. More combat flight hours as a crew chief than every pilot on this base combined. In '68, Asha Valley, he kept 60% of the 1st Cavalry's Hueys airborne with scavenged parts, baling wire, and sheer force of will. They didn't call him a crew chief, they called him the Ghost, because he made dead birds fly. He pointed a rigid finger at the Patriot Bell, its silent form suddenly sacred. That aircraft is no machine, it's a monument. In '69, during a monsoon, Vance field stripped and rebuilt her transmission in under 12 hours to save a downed recon team. In '70, he redesigned her fuel flow regulators in a mud-soaked tent, a modification no manual, no computer, will ever know. That mod let her fly higher, carry heavier, than any other Huey in the fleet. It saved my entire platoon when he flew in to pull us off a hilltop about to be overrun. I was a terrified second lieutenant, he was the calmest man I've ever seen, a black hero who held chaos at bay. A shockwave rippled through the crowd. Jaws hung slack, eyes wide with disbelief. Kramer looked as if he might vomit, his confidence shattered. Wells' face, pale to ashen, was fixed on the ground, unable to meet the general's gaze. Eli wasn't just a veteran, he was a titan, a black giant they'd tried to swat like a fly. The general's voice dropped lower, a whisper more terrifying than any shout. Your arrogance, your blind faith in technology, your utter lack of humility and respect have disgraced your uniforms and this command. You had the one man on this planet who knows this aircraft's every secret, standing here, offering his help. And you threatened him. You touched him. The last words weren't a question, they were a verdict, heavy with finality. A quiet voice cut through. Elias. General, he said, stepping forward, his dark hand resting gently on Michelson's rigid forearm, they're good men, just from a different time. They trust their screens. It's not their fault. The bird just needs a familiar touch, that's all. His grace was a blade, sharper than any reprimand, defending the very men who'd humiliated him. In that moment, he wasn't just a hero, he was a teacher, offering a lesson in wisdom and forgiveness that burned deeper than anger. Michelson held his stare for a heartbeat, then gave a curt nod, stepping back. "She's yours, Ghost." Eli moved to the Huey's side, his fingers unfastening the snap on his worn leather pouch. No diagnostic tool, no complex meter, just a single wrench, dark and hand-forged, its curve matching no standard kit. As his calloused fingers closed around it, the world flickered. He was in Kezan, 69, in a sweltering makeshift hangar, the air thick with canvas, oil, and the tang of hot metal. He'd ground this wrench on a wet stone, shaping it by hand, testing it against a custom bolt he'd machined himself. It was for his modification, a manual bypass for the primary fuel injector, an emergency fix no computer could detect, a secret he'd carved into the heart of the Patriot Bell. Back in the present, he approached the small access panel Kramer had dismissed. With his custom wrench, he turned the 4 bolts, their threads yielding with a smoothness no standard tool could match. The plate lifted, revealing a simple lever nestled in a tangle of wires, set to standard. With the wrench's tip, Eli nudged it to the bypass position. It clicked softly, a sound like a lock turning in a vault. He replaced the panel, tightening the bolts with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this in the dark, under fire. Eli stepped to the cockpit door, his voice calm, almost trance-like. "Someone want to try her now?" Kramer stumbled forward, hands trembling as he climbed into the pilot's seat. He ran the startup sequence, fingers flying across switches from muscle memory. Ignition. A cough. A sputter. Then, a thunderous roar that shook the tarmac. The turbine screamed to life, the rotor spinning, slowly at first, then faster, a shimmering disc slicing the air. The whomp-whomp-whomp of the Huey's heartbeat pounded through the crowd, a sound that carried the soul of a generation, the echo of jungles and sacrifice. The effect was electric. A spontaneous cheer erupted, raw and unfiltered. Airman Peterson, the young man who'd made the call, had tears streaming down his face, his quiet faith in Eli vindicated. The technicians clapped, their earlier arrogance replaced by pure, unadulterated awe. Eli stood back, a small, sad smile on his weathered face, his dark skin glowing under the sun as the bird he loved roared back to life. What legacy would this moment forge? And how would it ripple beyond the tarmac? The fallout was swift but measured, a testament to Michelson's restraint. No court-martials, no firings. Instead, he launched the Heritage Program, a mandatory training initiative for all maintenance personnel across his command. It wove the history of the Army's iconic equipment through the stories of those who flew, fought, and fixed them. The first module centered on the UH-1 Huey, its star a grainy photograph of a young Elias Vance, black crew chief, eyes fierce with purpose, his dark hands steady on the tools that kept men alive. The image was a bridge between eras, a reminder of the unsung black heroes who shaped history in the shadows. A week later, Kramer and Wells found Eli at a roadside diner a few miles from the base. The place was small, its formica tables chipped, its air heavy with the scent of coffee and fried onions. Eli sat in a booth by the window, nursing a mug, his ebony skin catching the afternoon sun like polished obsidian. They approached, hats in hand, their faces etched with shame. "Mr. Vance," Wells said, voice barely a whisper, "we're sorry. No excuse. We were arrogant, blind. Wrong." Kramer's voice cracked, thick with emotion. "We disgraced ourselves, sir. Please, accept our apology." Eli looked up, his brown eyes reading their remorse like an open book. He gestured to the empty seat. "Sit down, boys. Coffee's on me. Got time for a story about that bird?" They sat, and as the sun streamed through the diner's window, Eli spoke. His voice, low and steady, carried them to jungle clearings, to nights lit by tracer fire, to moments when his dark hands and quick mind kept the Patriot Bell aloft, saving crews who'd never know his name. He told of the pouch, a gift from a pilot he'd saved, and the wrench he'd forged in a tent under monsoon rains. His stories wove courage, ingenuity, and the quiet, unassuming valor of a black man who history had overlooked. Eli's legacy was more than a fixed helicopter, it was a lesson etched in rotor blades and sweat. Technology evolves, but the human touch, the soul of experience, endures. He'd faced injustice with grace, turned arrogance into awe, and kindled inspiration in a new generation. What happens when we dismiss the wisdom of those who came before? Eli showed us, true heroism whispers, then roars. This is HeroHush Stories, where the forgotten rise to claim their due. If Elias Vance's tale of grit, grace, and redemption gave you chills, our next story will set your soul ablaze. Smash that like button if this hit you deep, subscribe for weekly doses of courage and justice, and drop a comment. What's the greatest act of quiet heroism you've witnessed? Share this video with someone who needs a spark of inspiration. Hit the bell, we drop tales of valor every week. Stay bold, stay heroic.